Welcome to the Big Tech Gut Check here on Scrolling to Death. This is a weekly update for parents on all things social media and big tech. Today's update is for the week of April 29th, 2024. First up today is a new study from Pew Research Center. This is going to be really interesting for parents. So Pew puts out some of the most legit research on these topics. They asked the question, do Americans feel that social media companies have too much influence? And here's what they found. So 2/3 of Americans think social media has a mostly negative effect on the way things are going in the country today. Most Americans favor more rather than less regulation of big tech companies. And what's interesting is that support for more regulation from the government on these big tech companies is identical to what it was 6 years ago. Yet no federal legislation has passed to regulate social media or make it safer for children. 8 in 10 Americans say that social media companies have too much power and influence in politics specifically. So think about that. We as Americans, we're on to these companies. We believe they have too much influence on our society, and they specifically influence what laws pass. So a different organization called Issue One just released how much these companies are paying lobbyists to influence representatives to vote against online safety bills. Before I tell you the numbers, I want to remind you that these companies, Meta, Snapchat, Discord, Google, they can pretty much do whatever they want. They are protected by a law created in 1996 called Section 230. Section 230 was created to provide immunity for online computer services with respect to the content generated by its users. So at the time, it was deemed that these companies are not responsible when something bad happens on their platform. But things have changed in 28 years, and these companies strongly influence what happens on the platforms through AI technology, through algorithms, through quick ad features, and For You feeds. So shouldn't there be a liability now for when something horrible happens to a child when they were served content without searching for it, or when a platform suggests they connect with a drug dealer or a pedophile? Bills like the Kids Online Safety Act, KOSA, are important to provide a duty of care, meaning that platforms would be required to exercise reasonable care in the design features to mitigate harms including sexual exploitation and abuse of children. Alex Fraser of Issue One said it really well. So he's quoted as saying, "Unaccountable social media companies are harming our kids, weakening American democracy, and undermining U.S. national security, all while simultaneously deploying vast influence campaigns and legions of lobbyists to silence the overwhelming majority of Americans who want to see Congress pass bipartisan safeguards that prioritize more than the bottom line of a few corporations." So let's get back to how much these companies are spending to fight against bills like KOSA that would keep our kids safe. So in the first 90 days of this year, Meta spent over $7.6 million on lobbying, and they employed 64 lobbyists, one lobbyist for every 8 members of Congress. That's a salary of $120,000 per lobbyist for 90 days of work. The parent company of Google and YouTube, called Alphabet, spent over $3.6 million on lobbying. Microsoft, who owns LinkedIn, spent $2.5 million. Snapchat spent only $420,000 individually, but Snapchat is a member of several trade organizations like TechNet and NetChoice, who do the dirty work on behalf of the tech companies. I saved ByteDance for last because ByteDance, who owns TikTok, is on a mission to survive in America after the latest bill that President Biden signed into law last week. So in the first 90 days of this year, TikTok spent almost $2.7 million on lobbying. TikTok dumped money into lobbying to try to fight the TikTok law, which is giving ByteDance 12 months to either sell TikTok to an American company or it will be banned in U.S. app stores. This is in response to national security concerns that all of our TikTok data could be in the hands of the Chinese Communist Party. ByteDance has denied that our data has been given over, even though they would be required to if the Chinese government requested it. And ByteDance has told us that they have separated U.S. data from other data, housing it in servers in America. But this week, former TikTok employees are saying otherwise. Patrick Spalding Ryan is a former head of security and engineering at TikTok. He is saying that ByteDance closed the front door, but didn't actually cut ties with the Chinese parent company because of their complex computer structure. ByteDance still has control over TikTok staffers' messaging and tech management software. Therefore, the door was not closed to American info and data. So a couple other points related to TikTok that I find interesting. ByteDance's next step is to sue the U.S. government, citing First Amendment rights. Sources are saying that if they cannot get the law overturned, they would rather close down TikTok in the U.S. then sell. A sale could be unlikely because the powerful algorithm, maybe the most powerful in the world, is key to ByteDance's overall operations. And TikTok only makes up a small part of their total global revenue, so giving up their algorithm would impact their overall business. Lastly on this, Team Trump is working hard to convince Americans that with this new law, the government is trying to control the internet, which I do not believe to be true. I don't believe it is censorship. I believe it's a true national security risk. And we have to remember that in 2020, Trump was trying to get the same law passed to ban TikTok in America. He had the same concerns then about American data being in the hands of the Chinese Communist Party. So there's that. And lobbying isn't the only way that big tech tries to influence society in favor of their profits. They also fund and invest in research. And while I believe it's vital to find out how tech and smartphones and social media is actually affecting our children and us, it is important that the research be unbiased. How can a research study on these topics be unbiased if it is funded by the companies that create the technology? A new article came out this week in the New York Times titled, "Are Smartphones Driving Our Teens to Depression?" This is an opinion piece that pushes back against research that there is a connection between smartphone use and teen mental health issues. The opinion piece quotes a man named Andrew Przybylski. His quote is, "I would say there is no uniform trend showing a global crisis. And where things are getting worse for teenagers, there's no evidence that it is the result of the spread of technology." No link to teen mental health issues and their tech use? Really? So we need to understand that this man, Andrew, he works for the Oxford Internet Institute at the University of Oxford. This institute is funded by a man who owns $100 million of shares in Meta. This institute puts out regular articles reporting that social media is great for kids and that there's no connection between smartphone use and social media use and teen mental health issues. So the takeaway here is we can't take research at face value. We have to understand who's funding it, and does the funder benefit from skewing the research one way or another? And to be clear, after speaking with hundreds of families spending years researching and studying these topics, I am Team Jonathan Haidt and strongly believe that our children's excessive use of smartphones and social media is causing an increase in anxiety, depression, and suicidal ideation.
You need to read this book. Everybody needs to read this book, The Anxious Generation, and you will understand why we are where we are and what we can do to get to a better place for ourselves and our children. The Anxious Generation. Woo!
Thank you, Oprah.
There you go.
All right.
Some things need to change around here.
Let's switch gears and talk about phones at school. I have talked to teachers and school administrators across the country, and I cannot overstate how big of a problem this is. Kids having smartphones at school results in less focus, poorer performance. Kids are coordinating to meet each other in the bathroom to vape or to fight. Kids aren't socializing. They're taking and sharing inappropriate photos of each other and of teachers. Teachers cannot teach because they're spending entire lessons regulating cell phones. It is obvious that we have to get cell phones out of the classroom. Most schools in the US have actually banned smartphones, but the bans aren't working. Kids are still bringing them out in class, and on a whole, all of the above problems persist. So what is the solution? The only thing that is working is allowing kids to have them but locking them up during the school day. Over 2,000 US schools have implemented magnetic pouches by a company called Yondr. You may have seen these pouches at a recent concert or comedy show, so kids have to slip their phones in these pouches and lock them up until the end of the school day. This week, the Washington Post released a report about a middle school in Connecticut who implemented the Yondr pouches a few months ago, and the results have been profound. Teachers can start the day with "good morning" rather than "put your phone away, take your earbuds out." Students are sharing "I can focus more," and they say they even forget that they have their phones with them. Kids are paying attention in class. No more group vaping sessions in the bathroom. No more using AirDrop to share inappropriate photos during class. No more social media fueled arguments. Bathroom breaks are shorter. Students are sharing that they're making more friends. Parents have even come around. I'm a huge fan of the solution, and I hope to see it implemented in all schools. If you like the idea of this solution and want to introduce it to your school principal, I'll include a link to the Washington Post article and the episode notes below. And on this week's episode of Teachers Talk, I spoke with Principal Reagan Berry from a West Texas high school. We went in depth on these issues with phones at school and about the Yondr solution, so you can watch or listen to that episode, along with all my other episodes at scrollingtodeath.com. Thank you for listening yet again to another episode of the Big Tech Gut Check here on Scrolling to Death. The more that we know as parents, the more we can prepare and protect our children. I will be in touch next week.